It all started with a scream sharp, frantic, and echoing through the quiet rescue yard of Pine Hollow Shelter. 2 volunteers dashed toward the sound, their hearts pounding, already knowing who it was. Bruno. A flash of black and gold fur shot past the broken fencing. His ears were flattened, his eyes wide with panic, and froth dripped from the corners of his mouth. Another kennel destroyed. Another metal door bent under the force of his fear. Bruno had only been at Pine Hollow for 12 days, but in that short time he had left behind a string of warnings. He'd been found near the wreckage of a burned vehicle on the outskirts of town, his coat still stained with ash, and a half-melted chain dangling from his neck like a scar. Animal control officers said he had growled at everyone, bitten a handler on his first day, and crashed through a steel gate the next. From then on, he had earned a reputation. Don't approach. Dangerous. Unpredictable. Claire Bennett, a former combat nurse turned new volunteer, stood frozen at the edge of the scene, clipboard in hand. What she saw before her wasn't just rage. It was something much deeper: desperation, collapse. Bruno wasn't snarling out of anger. He was falling apart. Then the dart hit. Bruno staggered sideways, his legs buckling beneath him, and crumpled into the corner. The staff sighed in unison. This wasn't the first time it had happened. It was the 4th time in 10 days. Everyone thought Bruno was a lost cause, too far gone to be saved. But Claire wasn't ready to give up on him just yet. That night, long after the shelter lights had dimmed and the last staff member had gone home, Claire returned. No clipboard, no leash, just a jar of peanut butter and a quiet determination she couldn't quite explain. Bruno was awake, crouched in the shadows of his enclosure. His ears were alert, his breath still shaky from the sedative. He didn't bark when she approached, but he didn't move either. His eyes tracked her cautiously, tired, distant, unsure of whether to trust her or to attack. Then something shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was confusion, curiosity, and just for a moment, a trace of recognition, not of her face, but of her stillness, her calmness. She wasn't demanding anything from him, not obedience, not violence. She simply existed in the space between them, quiet and unhurried. For the first time in weeks, someone had looked at him without expecting anything in return. Someone had looked at him not as a threat, but as a living creature who deserved a moment of peace. Bruno, for the briefest second, didn't see her as a danger. He saw her as a soul, one that understood. Claire didn't speak. She didn't try to get close. She simply sat down outside his gate, her legs crossed, her back straight as though she was settling in for a long wait. Slowly, she unscrewed the lid of the jar and placed it near the bars just within his reach. The scent of the peanut butter reached him first, and his nose twitched. But he didn't come closer. Claire waited. 10 minutes passed. Maybe more. Not a word. Not a hand extended. And then, barely above a whisper, her voice broke the silence. "I don't think you're dangerous," she murmured. "I think you're scared." Bruno didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He simply stared at her, his tail motionless behind him. The next morning, the jar was empty. The staff barely noticed at first, but Claire did. She stood quietly at the end of the corridor, watching Bruno move through his enclosure. He paced slower that day, more deliberate. His eyes scanned the door as if he were expecting someone. Hadn't know it yet, but something had started to shift. The next morning, Claire came in earlier than usual, this time with someone by her side. Her daughter Emma, 8 years old, quiet, thoughtful, kind of child who noticed things others didn't. She rarely spoke to strangers, often kept her drawings tucked close to her chest, but that morning she held one in her hand. A simple sketch of a dog drawn in soft pencil lines with a heart floating above its head. Claire hesitated. At the entrance, she hadn't told the staff she wasn't even sure if it was allowed, but Emma had insisted, hugging her sleeve with quiet confidence. "Mom, can I just try once, please?" Claire gave in. Bruno was curled up in his kennel, awake but distant, his eyes tracked every movement, tense and guarded. But as soon as Emma appeared, something changed. She didn't speak at first. She crouched low just outside the bars, small fingers gripping her drawing, then softly, "Hi, I had a dog like you once. He got hurt you, but he got better." The air seemed hostile. Bruno lifted his head, twitching his nose, catching something, maybe her scent or maybe the warmth in her tone. He rose slowly, one step then another, until he stood just inches from the bars. Emma gently slid the paper under the gate. "This is for you." He didn't growl, didn't pace. He simply stared, drawing his body quiet. Then, in amazement that silenced the whole shelter, lay down beside it, his nose just brushing the edge of the paper. Everyone who witnessed it knew something irreversible had begun from that day on. No one dared move the drawing, not even during cleaning rounds each morning. Bruno, as there curled beside it, as if guarding something fragile, as if that small wrinkled piece of paper meant more to him than food or comfort. It was proof of being seen, of not being alone. Claire didn't understand it fully, neither did the trainers, but none of them questioned it anymore, because for the first time Bruno had chosen to trust someone. And that someone was a little girl with a sketch and a quiet voice. Changes didn't happen overnight. Bruno still barked when strangers came too close. He still tore up his blankets first to eat unless the room was empty, and shredded every toy that staff left inside, every toy except one, the small one plush dog Emma had brought him few weeks before. Soft pink, missing one eye, her favorite. Claire had hesitated. "Sweetheart," he might tear it apart. She warned gently, but Emma had simply smiled. "That's okay, it's for him to feel better." Claire opened the gate just enough to toss it in. Everyone watched. Bruno stiffened. He approached slowly, sniffed it, and then, instead of destroying it, he picked it up and carried it to the corner, laying beside it like it was something sacred. Hadn't growl when Emma passed by, hadn't pace when she read to him. In fact, listened every day after school. Emma would visit. She'd sit just outside the kennel, legs crossed like her mother hadn't, reading books out loud, stories about quiet heroes, brave animals, far-off adventures. Sometimes Bruno would inch closer. Once he even laid his head near her shoe. The staff noticed, and slowly, carefully, they allowed Emma inside the enclosure. 5 minutes at first, then 10. She brought a small brush one day, and after waiting for Bruno to settle, began to gently stroke his fur. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He closed his eyes, leaned into her touch, as if trying to remember what kindness felt like. Thick all came on a rainy Thursday morning. Claire was in the back hallway, folding blankets, when the shelter director stepped in, holding the phone with a strange look on her face. "There's a man on the line," she said. "He thinks Bruno might be the dog he lost." Claire froze. The man's name was Mr. Langford, a retired firefighter who lived 2 towns over, had seen a photo of Bruno in a local newspaper, the story about the danger-house dog turned gentle, and said he recognized him. Immediately his voice crackled through the speakerphone, trembling with hope. "He was man. He went missing after a break-on and fire last year. I searched for months. He thought he was gone forever." He spoke off the posters, the reports, the sleepless nights of giving up. Only when everything else had failed, the shelter staff checked Bruno's microchip. The old data was still intact, and when scanned, it confirmed everything. The ID matched Langford's registration from over a year ago. The meeting was set for Friday that night. Claire couldn't sleep, neither could Emma. "What if he remembers him, Mom?" Emma whispered, hugging her blanket. "Will have to leave." Claire didn't know how tones were technically. Mr. Langford had thyroid, but this wasn't about Ruley Santamore. Bruno had a past, but he also had a home now, and somehow they all knew Friday wouldn't just be a reunion, it would be a decision. Friday came quietly. Sky was overcast, and the shelter halls felt heavier than usual. Langford arrived with a cane in one hand and a small weathered photo in the Athera picture of himself sitting on a porch, a younger Bruno lying loyally at his feet. He didn't speak much at first, just ran his hand along the photo's edges. As staff led him toward the kennel, Bruno was lying near the back of his enclosure, his plush toy tucked beside him, Emma's drawing still pinned to fuel. The old man stopped just outside the gate. His voice cracked. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "Do you remember me?" Bruno lifted his head, not fast, not startled, just aware. His eyes locked onto the man standing there. Something in him shifted, rose slowly, step by careful step, and approached the gate. Mr. Langford knelt down, groaning under the strain. He slid photograph under the bars and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out an old leather collar, worn but intact, with a brass tag that read "The Shelter." When silent, Claire watched, holding her breath. Emma stood a few steps behind, clutching the fabric of her sleeve. Bruno sniffed fear, then the collar, then the photo. His ears tilted, trying to place the memory. A low whimper slipped out, uncertain, almost questioning. He looked back toward the far corner of the kennel at the drawing it, the toy. His eyes darted between the past and the present, between recognition and belonging, and then slowly he turned, walked back, lay down between the two things he had come to know. As safe, hadn't barked, didn't hide, just lay there watching. Mr. Langford nodded quietly. I understand," he said, voice thick. "You've already found your home." No one said anything. No one had to. The choice had been made by Bruno. It happened on a gray Saturday afternoon. The shelter was quieter than usual. Rain tapped gently on windows. Claire assumed Emma was just out with a friend, or maybe taking a walk, but by lunchtime Bruno was restless. Paced his kennel, ears up, eyes locked on the door. He whined, soft at first, then sharper. He pawed at the gate. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it, even if they didn't know why. Then the phone rang. Claire picked up the phone. On the other end was her mother, Emma's grandmother, voice shaking with fear, rushed, nearly frantic. "Emma hasn't come home from the library. She said she left hours ago, and she's not answering her phone." Claire dropped the phone. Her eyes snapped to Bruno, who had gone. Still he was standing, now alert, gaze focused, like was waiting for her to move, shouldn't hesitate. Against every policy, the shelter had. Claire opened the gate, clipped the leash to Bruno's collar, and leaned down. "Let's find her." They ran. Bruno pulled with purpose, nose to Thuand, ignoring everything but the scent they knew. Claire struggled to keep up as Hecate across sidewalks and side streets, weaving through alleys, tailed stiff with focus. Then 3 blocks from the library, Bruno stopped. He let out one sharp bark and scratched at a wooden gate behind an old bookstore. Claire shoved it open. There, curled under a broken awning, was Emma, her knees hugged to her chest, her glasses missing, a scrape on her lip. Her eyes widened when she saw Claire, but shouldn't speak because Bruno had already reacted her. He sat down beside her without a sound, pressed his head gently to her shoulder. Emma buried her face in his fur and began to sob. Claire knelt beside them, arms around both. Tears hottened. Silent they stayed like that until sirens came, until the neighbors speak through curtains, until the world caught up. But in that moment, there were only 3 of them, and Bruno had never left her side. Word of what Bruno had done spread quickly. By Monday, the shelter had received dozens of calls. Message poured in. Neighbors, reporters, even strangers from other towns. Everyone wanted to know, how could a dog labeled too dangerous to touch track down a missing child? But those who had seen it unfold didn't see a miracle. They saw something real. Bruno didn't bark when people visited. He didn't pose for cameras or react to applause. He only seemed to care about one thing, Emma. He waited by the door each afternoon until her backpack came bouncing through the shelter gate. When she arrived, he'd rise slowly, walk to her side, and nudge her hand with his nose. No commands, no training, just instinct. Claire watched quietly from the hallway as the town's opinion began to shift. People who once avoided Bruno's kennel now paused to look, and children waved. Older visitors swiped tears from their eyes. Bruno, for his part, didn't change much. He still lay beside Emma's old drawing. He still guarded the plush toy like a secret. But no, when people looked at him, they didn't see a threat. They saw loyalty. They saw purpose, and more than anything, they saw love. A week later, the shelter staff gathered for a meeting. Claire stood at the front of the room, holding a sheet of paper that trembled slightly in her hand. Her voice was soft but steady. "Bruno reminded us that no soul is beyond saving," she said. "Sometimes the ones who seem most broken end up healing us the most." She looked toward the front row where Emma sat next to her mother, holding Bruno's leash gently in her lap. Claire knelt beside her. "Emma," she said, her voice catching, If you'd like him toasté, Bruno is yours." Emma gasped eyes wide. She looked at her mom, who was already nodding through quiet tears. Emma dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around Bruno's neck, and whispered something only he could hear, Brunoliant, into her eyes closed, tail sweeping slowly across the floor. Hadn't need a new name, he didn't need a new story, he just needed someone to believe he was worth loving. And now finally was home life. After that was quieter, but full. Bruno settled into the rhythm of family life with quiet dignity. He slept at the foot of Emma's bed every night, waking only when she stirred. He waited at the school gate each afternoon, ears perking the moment he heard her voice. Emma began to change too. Shesmold more spoke louder, raised her hand in class. Teachers noticed, so did her mother, but it wasn't just Emma who had grown, it was the bond beside her. Bruno was more than a pet. He was her anchor. Years passed. One spring afternoon, the mayor invited them to a small ceremony. The park. Bruno received a golden heart-shaped tag engraved to the dog who saved a child and showed us the meaning of loyalty. But to Emma, he didn't need a tag. He had already saved her in ways no one else could see. When Emma graduated from high school, she wore a soft blue dress and carried a photo of her and Bruno taken the day they became a family. Couldn't climb the stage anymore, but from the front row he wagged his tail, and when his time finally came, it was gentle and it was quiet. Bruno lay by the window, sunlight warm on his fur. Emma sat beside him, fingers stroking his ears, voice low and full of love. "Oh, saved me, Bruno," she whispered, "and I'll never forget you." Emma never forgot. Years later, with Bruno's photo still framed on her desk, she pursued a life that echoed everything he had taught her. Patience, trust, and quiet courage. She studied animal behavior. Thena penned a small rescue center on the edge of town. Not big, not fancy, but filled with heart. She welcomed the scared ones, angry ones, the ones no one else wanted. And sometimes when the wind rustled through the trees just right, she swore she could hear a tail thumping softly in the distance. Not everything that Bruno gave her could be seen, but it lived on in every bark she answered, every dog she sat with in silence, and a very soul she refused to give up on, because love like that doesn't end, it continues quietly, faithfully.